It's Friday. It's good to see you today. Appreciate you joining us for another brief look into God's Word. Today we are in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, and we are wrapping up chapter 7 today. I would like to look at verses 25 through 32. Let's get over there. Let's read them together. As usual, my screen is not where it should be. Now concerning virgins, I have no commandment from the Lord, yet I give judgment as one whom the Lord in his mercy has made trustworthy. Spoken about that yesterday or the day before. I suppose, therefore, that this is good because of the present distress, that it is good for a man to remain as he is. Might see how that ties in with the verse we read yesterday. Verse 27, Are you bound to a wife? Do not seek to be loosed. Are you loosed from a wife? Do not seek a wife. But even if you do marry, you have not sinned. If a virgin marries, she has not sinned. Nevertheless, such will have trouble in the flesh, but I would spare you. But this I say, brethren, the time is short, so that from now on, even those who have wives should be as though they had none. Those who weep as though they did not weep, those who rejoice as though they did not rejoice, and those who buy as though they did not possess, and those who use this world as not misusing it, for the form of this world is passing away. But I want you to be without care. He who is unmarried cares for the things of the Lord, how he may please the Lord. He who is married cares about the things of the world, how he may please his wife. The passage I want to focus on is verse 29 and down, especially 29 through 31. And we'll put all this in its proper context, because the context is the current distress that they were facing. This is not the destruction of Jerusalem. This is what was going to start happening, the persecution of Christians. And there was already a persecution of Jews. This is why Priscilla and Aquila had to leave their home. We read about that in our introductory lessons, talking about the chapter in Acts chapter 18. But within this passage, the attitude that Paul said they needed to have in the current distress, that's not our current distress. That's their current distress, the things that they were facing. Might there be applications for us? Maybe so. But this was the attitude that they needed to have. Look back at it, given that. Look back at the passage. So that from now on, verse 29, even those who have wives should be as though they had none. What is Paul saying there? I would suggest perhaps it is this. Act like you don't have any family. Given this current distress, as a preacher, I'll just, from my mentality, I've had to move a few times. First place I preached was Arkansas. Second place was Louisiana, and now I'm in Indiana. By the time we moved to Arkansas, and that was the first place I preached first time, we already had our kids. Had the two kiddos. So one of the things, anytime you move, it's always, how is this going to affect my family? How is this going to affect my spouse? How is this going to affect our kids? How is this going to affect school? How is this going to affect this? How is this going to affect that? And sometimes you don't move because of family. And it's, well, you know, we don't want to move, and it's we don't want to pull up stakes. What was Paul? Priscilla and Aquila, tent makers. Wonder why they were tent makers. Well, we don't want to pull up stakes. We put down roots here. We're comfortable, blah, blah, this, that, and the other. There's a time to have that conversation. But Paul says, in the current distress, those who are married should act like they're not married. How much freedom did Paul have to travel all around the known world at that time? How much freedom did Paul have? You understand why Paul was the chosen vessel? Paul was able to do things that perhaps some of the other apostles could not do. We know Peter had a family. Others had families. Paul, he didn't have a family. So it was not hard for him to act like he did not have a family, because he did not have a family. And he says this is what you need to act like. Namely, Don't put roots down. You may have to move, and you may have to move fast. And if people have already started making edicts, the government, Rome, had already started making edicts, and people were already having to move. Okay, so those who are married, they need to act like they're not married. Look back at the passage. Given the current distress, verse 26. Given the current distress, those who are married, those who have wives, should be as though they had none. Those who weep as though they did not weep, and those who rejoice as though they did not rejoice. Those who buy as though they did not possess. Especially those first two. Okay, so those who are weeping should behave as though they were not weeping. Those who are rejoicing as though they were not rejoicing. They were going to be facing persecutions. And we'll say this, because there's a number of ways to look at this passage to try to understand what he's saying. But I wonder if part of it is just this. You're going to have to get tough. You're going to have to get tough. You're going to, even now, even in the current distress, you'll have good times, you'll have bad times. The bad times, those who are weeping, you're going to need to act like you're not weeping. Those who are rejoicing in the good times, you're going to have to realize it's not going to last. So don't get too overly happy about things. You're going to have to get tough. Because it's going to be the situation wasn't going to get any better, I can tell you, for them. So, get tough. Now that next part. Verse 30. Those who buy as though they did not possess. So you're going to still have folks buying property. What did they need to act like? They need to act like they did not possess that property. So again, no ties. No ties. You might have to pull up stakes. You better get tough. You better act like, well, we don't want to uproot our family. You may have to uproot your family. No ties. Then the last part. And those who use this world as not misusing it. And it seems like, let me get over there. I want to look at the different versions to help look at the ESV on that. I think it's the ESV. And those who deal with the world as though they had no dealings with it. I thought that was a pretty good translation of that. Okay? Look at the ESV through the whole thing. And those who mourn as though they were not mourning, and as those who rejoice as they were not rejoicing, and those who buy as though they had no goods, and those who deal with the world as though they had no dealings with it. No ties, free of worldly care. And that's what Paul is really trying to get to. He wants them to look back at our passage. The whole point of this is, verse 32, I want you to be free from anxieties. And a little bit later, verse 35, for I say this for your own benefit, not to lay any restraint upon you, but to promote good order and to secure your undivided devotion. King James, for your own profit, that I may put it, that not that I may put a leash on you, but what is proper, and that you may serve the Lord. And this is the key. Without distraction. Without distraction. And that's what the Lord wanted. That's what Paul wanted. Certainly those who are married, they have to care for their spouses, but they needed to make sure they were serving the Lord. And sometimes that involves different things. The current distress. He did not want them to be distracted from serving the Lord in the current distress. So their marriages were going to have, they were going to be problematic. If you have an unbelieving spouse, you're going to have problems. It's going to affect your children. Those who are buying goods, those who are doing those things, don't get tied down to this. Stop being distracted. Stop being distracted by these things and serve the Lord. Be free from care, free from anxiety, and realize the kingdom is not about The kingdom's not about some of these things. The kingdom's not about these things. Serve the Lord. Get tough. Get tough given what's happening. This world is not your home. Even within marriages, get tough and recognize we are married till death do we part. We are not given in marriage in heaven. So let's make sure we keep our eyes on the goal. Keep our eyes, set our mind on heavenly things, not earthly. Do not be overly concerned about worldly care and things pertaining to this life. But get tough, given the current distress. Are there applications, for us today? Certainly. It would probably be wrong, though, to sometimes folks start pulling that verse about the current distress and making that apply to things that it doesn't apply to. But anyway, I hope the study's been beneficial for you. Hope you've had a good week. I hope this study of 1 Corinthians chapter 7 has been helpful. Appreciate you. Hope you have a good weekend and a good Lord's Day. Hope to see you Monday. Thanks for being with us today.